Hello, welcome back, our dear lurkers, to a new episode of the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. And today it's the episode Survivors we're going to talk about. But before we start with the episode, our introduction question for today is, what is your mood at the moment? And by mood, we mean, or I mean, are you more in the Halloween mood or the autumn mood, or is it already Christmas for you, or are you desperately longing for the last sun rays of the summer? Maybe, Alex, do you want to start?
Oh, I have the hardest time answering this question, I think, but oddly enough, I find myself mostly in a Halloweeny mood, not necessarily because I'm looking forward to celebrate myself very much, but right now, throughout October, most of the channels and most of the creators that I'm watching are doing some kind of Halloween special, so it kind of drags me into this mood inadvertently. What about you?
Yes, I have to say that I originally loved autumn very much. It was my favorite season when I was younger, but I turned into a summer person because, I just have more winter lows now that I'm an adult and just the end of the year is stressing because taxes. But I still enjoy autumn a lot, but I don't get spooky. I don't know, Halloween is just beyond me. I don't get why people celebrate it. I don't know. For me, autumn is just such a beautiful, colorful season with all of the leaves falling and the rainy days and the storms, and you can eat nice things, everything pumpkin and spice, and you can make apple cake and whatever. And it's like, why would you ruin it with? I don't get it. So I'm definitely in an autumn mood a lot without Halloween for me. And I already bought my first Christmas. I don't know. It was too early. But... and pumpkin spice latte, of course, that makes the autumn mood.
You managed to mention pumpkin spice twice in that statement, fulfilling every stereotype ever.
Okay, so now I have to admit that I like the Christmas cookies that I bought so much because they are like the only thing that you can get in Germany that tastes a bit like pumpkin spice, because not of the pumpkin stuff, but because of the, cinnamon and nutmeg and whatever. And so one other thing, when I get a pumpkin spice latte, it looks like my hair, the same colors. Are you satisfied?
I'm glad we are taking this as long-winded as possible.
That she roasted you there. With the Christmas cookies, I can definitely align there. I bought my first Christmas chocolate today, which I really, really love. I could eat this the whole time. Actually, I could eat it the whole year if it was available. Maybe it's for the best for my health that it's not available all the time. Though I have to admit, I am not really in the Christmas mood yet. I'm also kind of like the autumn feeling because I just love the temperature more than I'm not a summer person. It's way too warm for me. I hate wearing shorts and shirts. Shirts, okay, but I hate wearing shorts and stuff like that. I prefer long clothes. So autumn is the perfect season for me. And I really like also the rain and everything with this, also the color you at least like to get on the special photos of the autumn season. So I would guess, I'm somewhere there. Halloween, I have to admit, I'm also not really into, though I really like putting on costumes. That's something I like about Halloween, but the whole spooky stuff and everything is not really my thing, especially with all the horror movies or anything. I can't watch these things because the most obvious scare jump everyone sees coming 3 miles away, I get scared and throw everything away I have in my hands. So it's not fun for me. It's more fun for others to see me watching these kind of things.
Well, that's similar with me. I mean, I like horror movies a little bit, but I can pick one and then I have to deal with the aftermath for ever because I'm very bad with that as well. And I also don't get why you would pair. I mean, I know that it has a cultural background where Halloween comes from, of course, but I still don't know why it's such a hype to call this season spooky season. I sometimes find the summer nights where you accidentally can just really stay awake during a very short night and have like the early morning that is like slightly bright for hours. I find that like even in the Dracula novel, you have constantly. I don't know why autumn should be scary, honestly.
I think it's just peer pressure at this point. And where else are you gonna put it? But okay. I don't know if this episode counts as particularly spooky. I think it's not one of the spookiest that Babylon 5 has to offer. But it does give us a little bit of a mystery, which maybe fits the season also a little bit. So maybe we jump into a synopsis and then first impressions.
Yeah, this episode, The Survivors, it starts off with the information that the president is coming to Babylon 5 station. Yay! And everyone is hectically preparing everything for his appearance. And then we have an explosion. Big question, what happened? Yeah, and we have the Major Leanna Kammer, who is investigating this because she is the one responsible for the safety of the president. And while she's investigating, what comes to light is that apparently Garibaldi planted a bomb, which is nonsense, we all know. But she's quite avid on this, and Garibaldi has to run off and hide in the station and find out what actually happened. So I think that's about it.
That's a pretty good synopsis, including the fact that we never get to see the president visiting the station, unfortunately.
Yeah, but honestly, we know it's boring. I mean, who is sitting there like, oh, I love politics. I love to hear speeches. I'm sorry.
You just must have loved the Star Wars prequels, didn't you?
The problem most of the times is they talk and talk and talk, and the essential part of the speech they are given, you can summarize in like 5 minutes. So please stop wasting my time. I have better things to do.
Was this your first impression for the entire episode, or?
No, it wasn't that bad. Though I have to admit, this was an episode that was surprisingly boring for me, because it didn't really catch me with the emotions. So yeah,
definitely not alone in this. I think this is an episode that on paper works reasonably well for me. I think every part of the story interests me when reading the synopsis, but then the execution, and I think some of it comes down to the performances, kind of doesn't grab me, like you say, in the same way that maybe it should. And I'm never quite sure if this is because it's relatively early in the show still, so I'm not as invested in the characters yet, or if it's just a kind of mystery that I'm not super into. But it's definitely one that for me works better on paper than actual execution.
Yes, I have to say the first times I've watched it, it's also one I've watched times more because first part of Babylon 5 I've watched. I also wasn't so invested in, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's a good point to introduce some backstory of the characters, so I would definitely say it's an episode that's not just it's okay to have it, but yeah, I mean, I think it's not really interesting because you kind of know that Garibaldi will not be framed this successfully, and that we don't focus so much on how they frame, like, not enough to make that part interesting.
Yeah, the problem is the story about the friend he meets. Yes, that the whole how he stabilized him in his drinking habits, and how he became friends with him and the family and everything, and then him dying. It's rattled off at the beginning in several sentences, and it doesn't have the weight it needs to carry this strong emotions. Therefore, you don't feel the horror or the deep and depressing emotions Garibaldi is having, especially in meeting the daughter of his friend Liana Kammer, and that's botching the whole episode because the emotions are tried to be presented, but they don't get all the way to the one watching the episode because it's not enough.
Yes, and I also wondered about her character, how she was written or how she was shown, at least. I feel like witnessing that as a child, definitely, it was supposed to show that it had a kind of impact on her and that it kind of explains the way it works like that. But I was thinking there are layers missing. Like the only thing that she's totally sure about her thing, only thing, like, oh, I can be wrong, and I don't know, there was something missing. Like, should have another emotion.
We'll talk about her characterization at length because there's something. There are some very interesting aspects to that. I completely agree that the impact of this backstory is a little bit missing. I always imagine if this was a more modern show, we might have seen like an episode opener, which was a flashback to the time on Europa, where we just see this glimpse of Garibaldi's darkest hour and then spend the rest of the episode trying to figure out how these pieces fit together rather than just being told all that. And I think this is just where the writing styles of the 90s and the budget of the show are kind of hitting the limits in its early season.
But I have to get in there. It's not necessarily helpful to have such a flashback. The question is also, how are you constructing this flashback? I have to think of what was it, Batwoman, the series that I don't know when it launched. But I was really excited to see, finally Batwoman gets her own series, and I didn't even finished watching the first episode because the background story was, for me, written so badly. Here I have a tragic past and everyone died. I'm the only survivor. And you don't feel it because it's chopped so shortly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't feel like this is an important and traumatizing experience the character is making. And the same is here the point. Even if you tell something like that without showing necessarily a flashback, but you need to do more. You need to show more emotions or how this is impacting the character on a long term.
I agree. There's definitely, like, the way these things are told makes such a huge difference, which I think for me plays into this idea that on paper this backstory I feel like can work, but the way it is presented here, it gets a little bit not the emotional aspect of it across. But okay, in this case, maybe let's split this discussion off into like the main aspects of the episode. There's definitely the whole president comes to visit the station and a handful of world building details attached to that. And there is this, I think, for us, weakest part of the episode, which is Garibaldi's past and how that affects Kammer's investigation. And then there is a big point that the episode makes about how Garibaldi himself deals with this situation, which I think is where, if anywhere, the biggest emotional impact of this episode lies. So any preferences on which of the three we might start out with?
Pick your choice.
Then let's start off with is that us, like the pamphlet you noticed for the first time.
Oh yeah, there is some super fun stuff in there. But yeah, there is this premise that the president is coming to visit the station, and like you, Meike, already said, yay, speeches. And I think this is one of the moments where it really shows that we are all coming from a very European background and a specific national background, because this isn't a thing where we live. Like, if there is an election and the new chancellor is elected, he doesn't really do a kind of celebratory round across all the federal states and does his little hello thing, especially not on a place as small as Babylon 5. But of course, if you look at American elections, this is definitely a thing that is very typical that you do. And I think this goes there a little bit into the history that between the federal government and the state governments, there is a very special relationship there. So this idea that the president goes to these places and touches base with the people that live there is a much bigger thing. And I think it's interesting that this is something that gets carried over in the Earth Alliance here as well, where very clearly he's making a big statement. He's leaving Earth, his main base where most of the people are, and goes out there to the border of known space. And
Yes, but I think it's a bit simplified to say in Europe that just because you have these symbolizing visits on places sometimes. And I think that this is really a statement of visiting life as belongs to Earth, that matters. It's a symbol that politicians here do as well. I would just have to think really hard to come up with one that actually mattered to me personally. But it happens.
it's less connected to elections here, though, isn't it?
It depends, I guess. I think politicians do crazy things to make people join elections on European level, but that's another issue.
Yeah.
Depends.
Yeah, but the one of the reasons that is stated why he is visiting Babylon 5 was about immigration for aliens, and therefore Babylon 5 would be the perfect place to go to promote this through the connection Babylon 5 has to the other alien species.
Absolutely. And this is something interesting that we learn about the President Santiago at this point, is that he is pushing for some immigration laws and actually is obviously very invested in foreign policy in a way that is getting a lot of backlash back home, which is interesting because I think last time we talked at length about Santiago, we were more concerned about what his preserving Earth culture policies mean that he was elected on. And now we're starting to see that there is clearly some internal differences there, what that actually means. And it almost feels to me like he was basically elected by a base that was extremely pro-Earth, but the guy himself is trying to be maybe what we would call more moderately conservative. And now we see that he's kind of not managing to appease the more extreme groups of his electorate, and he's doing these rounds to places like Babylon 5. And it's interesting to see that even though Babylon 5 isn't that huge, it's definitely still like a big deal in terms of Earth policy. Which is funny because we also learned in this episode that it's chronically underfunded, as these places tend to be.
Yeah, though we don't really know what is the immigration situation for aliens before or at this point, and what does the president want to achieve, it's hard to say what is his way there, what's his intention of going there and promoting all this. So it's rather undefined and can actually mean anything in good and bad in a neutral way.
I would wager that it's probably something more pro-alien immigration, just because the stated goal of Babylon 5 is promoting cross-culture contact and stuff. So I feel like if he was strongly against this, he wouldn't deliver stuff.
Would be a calculated move, though.
It could be, definitely. Like, you're completely right.
It could be like some politicians say, yes, we take in refugees, but only those that have like degree.
Yeah.
Fair.
And I mean, there is also this aspect, he delivers a bunch of staff heroes to Babylon 5, which kind of, okay, it's a useful military post for us and less of a diplomatic station. So there's definitely, I mean, most likely it's getting spun for whatever people he wants to appeal to, that he just kind of can say, spin it in any direction that he wants.
I mean, more military force can also mean showing the muscles.
Yeah.
Like, we can do if we want, so don't anger us. That could also be there in this action.
And I wonder if we look back a handful of episodes to Deathwalker, where we had like there's the League of Non-Aligned Worlds threatening the station by sending warships there and push like diplomatic decisions through. You can easily see now how back on Earth people would have looked at that and say, okay, this is a very good justification to militarize Babylon 5 a little bit more. So we kind of see how the show has gone up to this point kind of shapes how Earth deals with Babylon 5, or at least how these pieces would fit together.
Any more to the president?
I find it very cute that we have Earth Force One, Air Force One, special spaceship for for the president that flies around escorted by a bunch of staffers. It's neat. I just
nice.
like.
It's nice to see that it's not working like the German version, where all the time there's something not functioning, and sorry, I will be late. The aircraft doesn't start.
I will say though, I am kind of glad that flying people out of dangerous countries is working better for our planes than flying politicians around. So at least they're cutting costs at the right arm. I'm excited.
But only this time, like 2 years ago, we didn't manage to get anyone out of Afghanistan. While we're talking about it, there was only like, oh, it's a Sunday, no, we can't send a plane.
It took them a little while, yeah.
Yeah.
But if we are going to improve things in one area, let's start with getting the people out rather than getting our ministers around. So that's our very specific German government aviation section of the discussion for anybody interested. So yeah, obviously the Air Force president has a little bit more luxury when it comes to that. I think this closes out of the politics part. The pamphlet.
Not the politics. That only closes the president, because we have to talk about the pamphlet, and we have to talk about the fact what kind of chaos pro-Earth groups can cause here, actually, and what kind of contacts they have. Because, up until now, we always had the situation that now and then weird Nazis from Earth showed up and beat someone up, and you were always like, yeah, okay, but why did they come out of nowhere and just give someone like a bloody nose and go away again? It didn't make any sense. And here you kind of feel like something is building up and we don't know what it is yet.
Yes, and I mean, that includes the fact, let's talk about the actual solution for the mystery of this episode. And this includes the fact that these people are embedded in government security services, which we've seen hinted at before. But yeah, they start getting into really strong domestic terrorism at this point, where they are planting bombs. And the pamphlet we keep talking about, at the very end, we have this moment of, he had home guard paraphernalia in his quarters, and there's like a little flyer that they actually printed out as a prop, which says "Purify the Universe," which is like the most overt slogan that this organization can possibly have. It's quite strong language that they're using there. So yeah, there's definitely this sense that they exist, and of course in this episode it's for very personal reasons, but in general the security of the president is more or less blind to this threat, which is also something that we are used to. This is sometimes these kinds of domestic groups that are stirring up are getting a lot less attention than potential threats from aliens, say.
Yes, kind of, because they have all these important positions and they're working all of these government authority jobs. And I mean, conductors in general are good in dealing with authorities, know how to talk to the police, they know how to press authorities. There's really like this blind eye.
Yeah, and the point is, since they played already for so long in the human team, they know how to get their way, and where an alien would be, I don't know what I should do in this situation, because the situation is something that just happens for humans. And yeah, it's feels more dangerous because you don't necessarily know the enemy there this good, because he's from the inside, technically.
The one thing that this entire plot makes me question, though, is how long this level of home guard terrorism has actually been a problem. Because we don't know that much about them in the past. They are talked about as something that is relatively recent, but we do know Babylon Stations 1 through 3 got blown up during construction. And the question kind of is, okay, if there are these hardcore pro-Earth groups, could they have something to do with this? So there is a good chance that Earth Force actually has a very substantial problem like this, which would make it then even more concerning that this doesn't seem very high on the priority list. That this is something that just kind of is there, that these people just happen to work for us every so often, and there's not really a good system to filter them out.
Yes, and we don't know enough about the political situation on Earth to really tell, but you could also get the impression that the problem has always been there, and it has probably gone unnoticed for much too long. But you can also think that maybe now with the new elections, the new president, with the new tension, it's building up a lot more, and Earth has to kind of have for it. We just don't know enough what happens in Earth politics.
But if we are talking about veering back into Earth politics, the one thing that I find interesting, and we will have to keep an eye on this later on, because I'm not 100% sure if I'm interpreting it right here, but we hear in this episode that where the president is getting a lot of backlash is in the Earth Senate. And we don't know exactly what the Earth Senate is, but I think we have learned already that some of the senators, at least, are representatives of the individual nation states on the Earth. Like they are de facto leaders of places like the Russian Consortium, Indonesia, and such, which would be interesting if this is actually a thing that, like, the nations back on Earth, and some of them at least, are taking this very pro-Earth stance, because then we would have now this mixture of Home Guard, which seems to be a grassroots movement of pro-Earthers, but then also like a big political level, which makes sense. You have so many nations on Earth that maybe have very many domestic problems and are trying to develop themselves and such, and are probably against investing hugely into deep space colonization and stuff. So these goals would align on these like different political levels, which is maybe one of the ways that Home Guard really has an into Earth politics.
And I mean, you also don't know how far developed the different countries are. I mean, if you put the problems of an industry nation and to a developing nation against each other, it's completely different. I think there was a nice comparison I once read. If you have a group of people living together, the one part is young, like 20 or something, and the other is 60, 70. All these have to decide what to do with the money they have together. It will be harder to get the older people to investigate their money in the same things the younger people want, because their attention is more on a short-term basis, since they don't need to do long investments. And
get along well.
And therefore it's like this. I think you can kind of resemble this problem. The focus is completely different, and that might be also a problem there, because I totally understand if there's a nation, we don't have enough clean water. I would also say, no, we're not investing money for going to space if we don't have enough to drink.
So if Earth really has this problem that some countries are really underdeveloped while we have built up something like Babylon 5, that's always the best start off to have unsatisfied forces versus if something like Home Guard are strong. Always kind of starts like that. Like really a problem. When you just have a big group of people that don't have everything they need to live with.
And this is one of these cases where, of course, we are aware that this is a 90s show. So it's a 90s show developed in the US. And so there is definitely a certain bias in terms of what people get cast. But if we set this meta reason aside and just look at Earth Alliance in universe, I think we can start to make a case that the people of Earth Force that we see represented in the show tend to be kind of what we look at in more Western industrialized nations of Earth today. So that it's not hard to make an argument that, yeah, Earth is not being represented by these people very equally. There's very clearly a certain bias towards certain nations that seem to have a bigger presence in the show, which is funny. We are probably going to do a special a little bit later on some of the fact books that Moon Ghost Publishing put out, and one of the main things is there that most of Earth Force personnel is actually German, because they are very militaristic people, because it's written in the 90s, so we have this great stereotype going on.
Doesn't the Bundeswehr right now have the problem that they don't get personnel anymore because no one wants to go there?
Yes, but the authors didn't know that. It's fine. But so it's definitely also, if you look at extended material, it is the case that Earth Force doesn't represent Earth entirely equally, and that fits into our idea here. And this actually makes for a nice segue if we start later on talking about Garibaldi's journey today. This is a really cool episode to showcase how much inequality exists in Earth Force and in Earth Alliance in general, because we get to see a lot of the underbelly of Babylon 5 today, all the little places that aren't the shining diplomatic sector, but just places where people live. And we see just even in Babylon 5 as a microcosm of Earth Alliance isn't very good at distributing resources very fairly.
Yes, but I find it interesting that we have a setting in which we have to deal with these inequalities in some way, because the Star Trek way is to erase nations and then you don't have the problem anymore. And I think this is much more interesting. Sorry, Star Trek, but it's a fact. We don't have nations anymore. It is not really mentioned. I don't even know in Star Trek if an officer knows where their family came from, like 3. Oh.
Don't ask Picard, because he's a British accent and comes from France, so clearly there's some confusion there.
I know what I mean, and I find it in general interesting that here we have this problem. Like, we also read in the fact book once that Polish people basically never leave Earth. Like, that's just a thing they don't want to do, and I was always wondering why. Because,
yeah, it's in general, the fact book is interesting because it assigns people of different nationalities racial traits. So let's there will be a separate segment on this in a special episode. But no, it fits what Babylon 5 does in general, that different nationalities exist, they have very different sentiments. Ivanova in this episode as well highlights that Garibaldi has a very Russian sentiment when it comes to government work, which great on that. So yeah, I think it's completely fair to say that we have this hotbed for Home Guard support, because Earth seems to be a mess, and in ways that are not entirely unfamiliar to us, which is one of the big strengths of Babylon 5, that it portrays this sort of beige future. Which we had a poll on this, whether or not people prefer like very utopian or dystopian or somewhere in between settings, and yeah, not surprisingly, Babylon 5 fans, I think, didn't give us a single vote for utopian future visions. A lot more fell into the sort of in-between part, and I think this is a nice episode reflect.
I think at least it's something in between, and not all going for let's have something dystopian, because then we would be somewhere with, I don't know, Handmaid's Tale or something like that.
And I think especially when it comes to pure dystopias, at least, the young adult variety of this sometimes has this stigma of building utopias around very weird issues and like weird arbitrary rules that are being enforced, whereas Babylon 5, the dystopian aspects that are in there are all very much rooted in problems that we already have, so it gets easy. Which is not to say that all dystopian works are bad. There are definitely some really great ones, but yeah, Babylon 5, that's a very special path there.
Yeah, in general, if you go into the extremes, if you have either utopia or dystopia, you have a hard job making it believable that it is.
And then it's also always the question whether or not that's even the goal. As much as we talk about Star Trek just erasing nations because it wants to have a utopia, like a big part of this is also we must acknowledge that the goal is to imagine a great future, not necessarily to explain it. Because if we could do that, then we could just, fix reality as well very easily, which we can't. Yeah, let's try to steer back a little bit into the topic. So given how this episode sets up this very grey world of Earth Alliance, we have two different perspectives on this, right? We have two people that were on Europa, which seems to be one of the worst places of Earth Alliance, where there's a lot of corruption going on. There's a lot of people that are at a disadvantage, even though they made it off-world. And at least how I would interpret it, you have Garibaldi on one side who managed to leave this place and leave this past behind and find Babylon 5 as a new home, and therefore could change to the better. And then you have Kemmer, who kind of got stuck in this past, and even though she advanced very highly her career up to the point of being part of the president's staff, her perspective on everything is very much more rigid for seeing this.
Do you really see it like that? Do you really see it like that we have a character to show that she got stuck in that past? And yes, I feel like it tries to show that both characters develop their ways of dealing with problems from this incident that they share in their past. And I mean, Garibaldi also still has problems that develop there. He's
Yeah,
a drinker.
very much so.
And but I think, for me, what I said before, there's like a layer missing. I feel like they could emotionally much more besides, oh, I was wrong, or oh, I see this pattern everywhere in it. I mean, for her, see that the patterns that are not always there. It's a bit less for her.
I have the problem. I mean, the idea of showing two ways of coping with a situation, or horrible situation they experienced. I really like that. My problem is that, like you said, Layla, there's something missing. At the beginning, we don't really get the information to understand why Liana is taking Garibaldi responsible for this. I mean, she's a kid. And there, I don't know, I would like to have some more information how she progressed to the idea it's Garibaldi's fault. And just, you drank and run, it seems a bit too short for me to grow an intention on this. And on the other hand, at the end, where they suddenly are hugging each other, there's also something missing for me, because she is doing a total change, and there's no reason for me to believe this. I mean, she is willing, okay, let's see if you're right, if there are more bombs, let's go and check it. And then she gets electroshocked. And after that, that does it. After that, she's completely different, and I was wrong. Honestly, there's no real reason for her to say I was wrong in this kind of context. Yes, she made a wrong decision, and it wasn't Garibaldi, but it's not on an emotional level there that completely overrides her attitude from before. At least not for me. It's too thin for me to believe this, which also makes the whole episode so boring for me, because it's not believable.
Yes. I think what is the problem is that, if I understood it right, because I'm also always a bit bored, so I didn't listen that much, actually. But if I understood it right, in the past, she accused Garibaldi of not of causing the accident with her father, but of not careful enough. I think that's the accusation she has for him in the past. And then she comes there now, and she feels like she discovered that he now planted the bomb. And I find it just, I don't know. I mean, she lost trust in him when she was a child, but I also kind of missed the step. What I would find much more natural is that she would assume that he just messed things up by accident and would not fall so or blaming him on purpose. I feel like that are two different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to purposely want to kill people and I can't speak today, and accidentally blow something up just because you neglected your job, which is the part what Garibaldi says in the beginning, that's how they got him out of the system. They didn't make a big scene. They said, yeah, no, you neglected, and that would fit more to the storyline than that what they did here.
Yes, I mean, if she would just really give him a totally hard time because there is this bomb problem, and would just constantly try to take over his investigation to prove to all of his colleagues that he's bad at his job and needs to be removed, and he's trying to work against that, that would be the more natural conflict, actually. Like, if you would see that now he has to try to win her trust back while she tries to work without him.
I'm a little bit of two minds on this, but I think for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to speak a little bit in defense of the episode, maybe. Because for me, what it really comes down to, or how I always read it, is this idea that for her, there is this this massive tragedy that she goes through in her childhood, where we see like this one little flashback of where I didn't really know if that was necessary for me. It just didn't feel very effective seeing her as like a child for this one scene. But there is kind of this idea in my head that she had Garibaldi as Uncle Mike, as this like person that she really trusted, and then this trust gets destroyed because there's a massive rip in her family and he isn't there for her. He just runs away. And for me, it always felt, because she was a child, she was very young, she doesn't really have a rationale for what exactly happened there. She doesn't really have a good idea of where to put the blame or whether or not he did it intentionally or not. For her, it's just this like foggy, I'm very disappointed in everything. And then she goes on to have her entire career without ever really having to specify any of this. She never has an interaction with Garibaldi, so it's always just this nebulous thing. And maybe I'm giving the writing a lot too much credit here, or maybe I'm just giving it a very big benefit of the doubt here, but all the inconsistencies in why she's mad at him and why that makes sense to her is kind of, for me, this idea, it is inconsistent. It doesn't really make complete sense how she justifies any of this, because it never did. It was just this child's idea of putting blame on something. And now that she's suddenly confronted with Garibaldi, she just kind of retroactively in her head convinces herself that it all makes sense, even though it necessarily doesn't. And for me, this still leaves the problem how this gets resolved so quickly. I think the more you lean into this explanation, she's just basically acting on childhood trauma here, the more you would expect that it takes a lot more to get out of this. But at least some of the inconsistencies, this is how I deal with them.
I mean, the electroshocks are a treat. That's so what do you have?
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's
Is that still a thing? I don't know.
Actually, it isn't, and actually, and not for trauma, actually, but for some things it can actually work, and it's actually done a lot better and a lot careful. Well, I just read about it for some other.
We are a lot more selective on how and when to do it.
Yeah, and how and when to do it, and how strong, and yeah. Actually, it can, and apparently it can help a lot.
So the
Yes,
disclaimer is,
but
don't
certainly
fix
not
yourself to cure depression. That's not how that works.
Question. You just said the child version of her. Was that in the episode you watched?
There is a single scene where where Garibaldi just got apprehended by security, and he's drunk on the floor, and he looks at her, and adult Kemal says to him, "Drunk again, Uncle Mike," and then he flashes back to her, seeing her as a child saying the exact same thing. It's like a blink it or miss it moment.
Yes, and it is in every version I've watched so far right now, so.
Because I really can't remember that. That
It leaves no
irritated me.
It's completely fine. But yeah. At the end there. So if we are talking about the parts of Kemal that don't work for us, the most 90s moment I think in the show so far is when we have the final scene with her, and the show wants to tell us, hey, she's loosened up now, so her hair is over.
Yeah.
Which is just...
Oh God.
I think a lot of what's going wrong here is she falls into this archetype of strong military woman, which we already have one on the show, which is Ivanova. But, Ivanova has a little bit of wit about her, a little bit of character about her, and it gets to develop that, so it works. But with Kemal, it's kind of this, she's a strict military woman, and then she stops being that, and then they flip frantically through the notes. So now she needs to be approachable, so change her hairstyle, and...
Yes,
character development.
I was screaming internally when I saw this. Oh God, where did you have to get this cliche out of the box? Really? Honestly, if a woman changes her hair, yes, she is about to do things, but not like this.
I mean, what I would have wished for there would really be to go deeper into what kind of other emotional impact the backstory had on her. Yes, it definitely kind of more of an impact than this strict and strong and the security person that we see her as, and then maybe have another level where you can see it. Not that she suddenly hacks Garibaldi again, but maybe you could have also have introduced her different actions and her colleagues that then changed throughout the episode. That you really, I think they really wanted to show something emotional, and then the hair was all that there was time for in the end, and that's kind of sad. So yeah. I mean, also learning to trust people again is also kind of sad because it's also kind of a stereotype, but I think you could have come up with something.
Yeah. But what I found quite scary was how she treated this. I forgot how his name was. Was it Nolan, the worker who installed the bombs, which wasn't known at the beginning? I mean, she whatever it is she is giving him is pushing him out of his sleep, his non-conscious state, asking him a few questions, and then he dies. Obviously, the drug or whatever she used is quickening the process, or maybe there was even a chance for Franklin to save this man. And I mean, to take this risk of killing someone just to get answers, that's tough and not in a good way. And that she's making this decision, and I mean, there's not talked about it later. I mean, okay, Sinclair is shouting at her and not taking it, but then it just runs off into nothing. And it's not. And I mean, what kind of person, what kind of character do you have to be to accept such an outcome? To wait that, okay, he might lose his life, but the answers are more important. What does it say about her?
Yes, I mean, she definitely goes over dead bodies here. It's not just a saying. Yes, and I think, yeah, that it has no consequences is kind of, it shows really how these authorities work on Earth. I mean, for me, it would have consequences because if Sinclair shouted at me, I would crumble a lot. But it has no real consequences, and that she knows she's completely safe, that she never has to justify for it. That shows, how militarized and authority Earth Force is.
I think this strikes me very much as one of these moments where the presidential office in Earth Force, of Alliance, I should rather say, has a lot of these special privileges, and we see this in real life every now and again. High leadership roles have these privileges where it's just expected that anybody that gets to this point is going to use them wisely. And here we get one of these instances where these extensive presidential authorities that she flaunts every so often in this episode are probably intended for very different things. They are not intended for somebody who is kind of going off on this personal vendetta and going off into this thing, but at this high of a level of authority, that high up in the hierarchy of Earth Alliance, there aren't very many checks and balances to make sure that this doesn't happen. It's not so much governed by rules there, rather than just by precedents being set, which is something that exists in the real world a lot. Maybe to us, it's a little bit less familiar because I think especially here there is a stronger emphasis on things being regulated more overtly.
What I think here now is that we see her. She's introduced quite early with going over a dead body to get her answer, and also killing someone to have everything under control so that the person that she's responsible cannot die or be killed in her watch, and that she is able to I don't know, really disregard the life of the person that she's questioning. It would have been an interesting transition, and I don't know how much of that you can one episode, but an interesting transition to maybe make us believe that she changed, that she kind of values life after making out with Garibaldi.
Be more empathic about the things she did, to realize I just ended a life just for my reasons.
Because now it kind of feels like, okay, she killed him, but also we found out that he also wanted to kill someone, so I mean,
it's
but at that point, no one knew.
Morality.
Yeah,
at that point, he was a victim, and it doesn't really matter what he did. It doesn't give you the right to kill this person.
Yes, but now that is kind of weakened because now we know that he was evil, so it's even more pushed into the background now. For me, I think how it's told, and that's not good.
And I think this is where the episode kind of gets in a corner, because realistically, the only good choice that she could make is look at everything that has happened on Babylon 5 and say, okay, I'm just going to resign my post right now because I'm obviously not fit for doing this. If I am abusing my power to kill a person for something that I myself now consider a personal vendetta, that's not something where you say, I will do better next time. No, that's something where you say, okay, I'm fundamentally just not fit for this role. I should not wield this authority and I cannot risk this happening again. I can go deal with my personal stuff for the next 10 years and then maybe come back and try again. But this is not something where you just say, I learned my lesson and I moved on. This is not something that the episode can really address. And I think we've managed to do something very special here, which is spend the majority of our main discussion actually on this character of the week, which most people, I in my experience, never talk about much. So unless you have like some major things still on camera, maybe let's move over into the part of the episode which personally I view in a little bit more of a positive light, which is Garibaldi's side of things and his little adventure, fleeing from the law with some very questionable choices, but also getting into the underbelly of Babylon 5, which I find has some very nice little tidbits. And I'll start with my favorite. In the very beginning, in the casino, we see the two little holographic knights that are fighting each other, and that's my favorite thing. This is like, it could be straight out of the country.
Before you go too far with this, maybe a little bit of a justification why we talked so much about Liana, because she is, at least in my perspective, one of the major reasons why this episode doesn't work the way it is intended, or at least the way I think it is intended to go.
I think it's very good also to say that, or to get into a discussion about that, because we don't want to stop there and say, well, the actress didn't do a good job, or the writing of this was bad, but to go a little bit in there, because I think we also come up with this many ideas of what we would like to have seen, because there is, I think we can all agree, there is some real potential there for a very interesting story to see.
Also, he spoiled that because he already said she was a character of the week. But I would have liked to ask Meike, do you think that she would come back in the future? Is she like someone who shows up now and then and reflects Garibaldi's inside, or what would your guess have been?
Was there ever a possibility?
Honestly, on my part, no.
Good. So I
because she is just, yeah, like all the things we just explained. She's just too weak of a character, and not just saying it's the actress or the writing. It's the whole thing that's presented that's too weak to give a comeback.
Okay, now we can talk
Garibaldi.
about Graphic Knights again. Yeah, Garibaldi, who this isn't the case. Garibaldi, for whom this isn't the first time we learn about his checkered past. We know since the Gathering that he has kind of this reputation of being almost unhireable within Earth Force, and Sinclair gave him this extra chance. And now we have a lot more context for this. So maybe let's start talking about this, because in essence, what we see here is a portrayal of alcoholism in a 90s TV show, which this combination of themes and words usually doesn't bode all too well. So I'm very interested to hear what you thought about that.
Okay, but first, funny info that many people will hate me for, but I mean, I cannot say that others can go first. What's other?
Now I'm just dying to know.
Yes, me too. Please.
You can't give us that teaser and then just say, "Oh, I'm too controversial for this podcast."
No, I just felt like I would be very rude and inconsiderate of struggles with this who are listening. But my thought is always, I mean, it's very bad that he gets arrested and everything after he gets drunk in that bar, but also everyone kind of wants him to work with the authorities again, so it's not the worst outcome. And there's one moment where he's just completely drunk and wasted. Everyone is just like, if he has a little bit of fun, I don't know where I myself a little bit when I see that. I'm sorry.
I mean, we can dissect that, because there is the question, do we measure the impact of alcoholism by how much it affects your career, or is there maybe something more to it? Because I feel like nobody is questioning that things work out for his job-wise.
I said that it was not completely serious. It was just that in that scene I sometimes like when you are under so much stress and you run for the authorities. Not that I've ever done that, but I've just not opened letters and ignored the authorities in time frames that felt dangerous. Then just I don't know. I feel like actually there it's. I mean, I know that you probably want to criticize this on alcohol a lot, and we can do that on many moments, but I feel like this moment where he is in that bar and he just gets this one drink and then he just dives into it because it's just such a way of letting go and of just floating away, and he knows that he's going on a mistake next and that's not going to happen. But I just kind of identify with this moment of that he has that for a second, so I find like that was pictured very authentically. Like however serious your run for the authorities or from your letterbox is, a glass of wine can always just make you lay down and surrender in a very positive feeling that isn't one, but you know.
I will surprise you because I'm going to say I don't want to criticize this portrayal of alcoholism, but I think this is also like the key difference here. You can say that because you're not an alcoholic. And I think, because then you can have this idea running from the authorities, having a glass of wine, diving into this is something that is fine and is okay.
That was not what I was saying.
Okay, then I misunderstood.
What I was saying was that how it is pictured, how he is completely serious about not being caught, and how he has a lot of plans and knows how to get his way, and then he gets this one drink, and then all of his serious thoughts, all of his how determined he is, everything that is washed away, and you just see how his mind lets go, and we see a version of him that we are not so familiar with, and for a moment he just is. It's like all of the pressure and all of the thoughts are gone, and we just see him stumbling around there, and for that moment it looks very peaceful, but you know that it is falling apart in the next second, because that's always when you let us picture very well, I think.
Yes, and I completely agree with that.
Yes, I'm not okay, but what you just said felt like I said, okay, you can just drink that away a glass of
No. It's just, I think this portrayal is completely fine. I think it just opens up this dichotomy of how you can view that. Like you said, you can identify with this to some degree because there is definitely this aspect to alcohol consumption where it has these effects, and that is completely fine. It's only once you get the pretext of Garibaldi being an alcoholic where you can look at this and also see this is at the same time intensely tragic what's happening right there, because what he's doing is falling off the wagon. And this is what I really like about this portrayal, actually, that it's not kind of saying he's an alcoholic, so drinking alcohol is the worst thing ever and immediately, leads to direct insanity. No, the way that it's portrayed here is something that for somebody else could be a perfectly pleasant experience. And this is what one of the aspects I really enjoy about this portrayal, because it feels very true to life.
What I also, I get that point now.
And now let's Meike have a word, because she was patiently waiting for us to sort this out.
I have to admit, I don't have really something to say about this because I'm so disconnected to this kind of experience. It feels rather alien to me. I probably say something everyone will say, what? I never got drunk in my life. I always stopped before this point because every time I got to a certain level of alcohol, I get leg cramps. I think this is totally crazy, and luckily I found another person who has exactly the same problem. I don't know how this is related, or it sounds laughable.
That's a perfect defense mechanism.
Right?
Really, it's like this, that, and that's for me. The moment where I start feeling unwell, I just stop. I can't really explain this in any other way, but I also never had the desire to go to the level of losing so much control through alcohol that I do things I actually don't want to do.
Oh, I've had that.
And I never got to that point, and therefore I know I've seen people being drunk and everything, but it still feels alien to me because it's nothing I connect to, and I also do not really understand the desire for getting to this point. I do understand that you want to forget things and that alcohol, like other drugs, is a way to do that. Maybe I'm just too heavy-minded of a person to get the idea of let's try this, because it's so struck in my head that the problems won't go away. Sit down and, I don't know, have some out time doing something else that's working more or less good for me. But I never got to the point where I said, okay, I want to drink alcohol to be out of my person. This is actually something that I find rather scary, to become someone else because you take alcohol too much of it or whatever there is. And therefore this whole scene is, I don't know what I expected, but what is missing there for me is the despair or the negative feelings. I mean, he was getting drunk on a regular basis, which destroyed a lot of his life. And now he's drinking, and it doesn't feel like it is really a problem. Maybe it's the whole episode that is not portraying this whole thing, or because we know, like already said, that Garibaldi is not having bad consequences in any way, but it doesn't feel bad for me. I don't get a feeling that he's doing something horrible in this moment. And yet that's something that's wrong for me, who never experienced this.
I think that's the tricky thing with alcohol or with addiction in general, because I think to really see what's negative about it, you have to see the pattern. When you just see him there getting drunk and he gets talkative and then he's funny and then he's dancing around, you feel like you just have a funny person in front of you. And I guess the thing about drinking then really is that in his case probably needs the alcohol to become that person and let go of all of these other thoughts. And I mean, there are people that drink because otherwise they cannot function in social contacts, and I can identify with that a little bit, because it's always I don't know, well, I would be so much more funnier and talkative if I was drunk. That's really because then you can just let go out of so much. And but I think you see here that he has this master plan, and it would probably, Garibaldi knows so much about the station, and we know that he has this. Can make plans, he can catch any criminal on the station. If he would not have gotten drunk there, they would have had a really hard job catching him ever. So then you really see that all these plans are gone, he just stumbles into a mistake he would never do without the alcohol. So I think...
Which gets to the point, why is he starting at this moment to drink again? Of course, the situation is supposed to be stressful, pressing, traumatic, because he is meeting I forgot her name, Liana, again, and therefore the whole emotions about his dying friend or his dead friend are coming back. But I think also this is something that's not portrayed well enough to make it believable that he's at a breaking point where he says, oh, okay, forget it, I need this drink right now.
Or maybe he's just tired.
Yeah,
maybe he's just tired of running, and without that drink, he would have never really surrendered to the authorities, but also kind of knows that he cannot do it forever. That could also be the thing that just lures him when he sees this glass. Or it's just a mechanism that he sees it, and there's just like buttons in his head thing. Because I think there are a lot of options.
There are a lot of options. I am going to interject here and once again speak a little bit for the episode on this.
I'm also speaking for the episode.
Yes. It's fine.
I'm also speaking for the drinking. Am I good?
I think the show definitely has a massive challenge here of saying you can't cram alcoholism into one episode. Or at least every time a 90s show does this, it goes horribly wrong. But then you need to have a starting point, right? You need to start establishing the pattern, like you say, at some point. And that is very difficult, because on the one side, I feel like it's true that this episode doesn't really get the point across of how tragic of a fall of the wagon this is. But at the same time, if it were going more into the extremes, it could also stop feeling believable. And for me, the sequence in the bar is so compelling because I feel like it portrays the mundanity of it very, very well. That idea that if you are an alcoholic falling off the wagon, isn't the danger that happens to you if you have like the worst day of your life and things are incredibly stressful, and this is where you desperately like forgo all your barriers and you grab the bottle and it's this big cinematic moment. In this case, it's much more so he happens to be in a bar. He happens to offer the alien next to him, Centauri Ducat, to borrow the hat, and the alien just says, just take my bottle then if you don't want the hat. And it's just this like very mundane, very moment, and Garibaldi is just kind of thinking, well, if I have the bottle already, I guess one drink can't do that much harm. And then it spirals from there. And I think on this level, the scene works for me, where I don't see it or don't interpret it as this last desperate moment where Garibaldi at some point makes the decision to drink again. It's more this him unwittingly stumbling into it, and then it just kind of happens to him. And this mundane moment where just for one moment you let your guard down and then the alcohol comes to you almost, that works. But then I also have to acknowledge the show on its own doesn't really give you that. You kind of have to work towards this view. Yeah.
I mean, there is this moment where he looks at the bottle and where we are waiting there. Well, is he drinking? Is he drinking? Will he drink or not? And there you can just, I think, come up with a lot of things that can go on in his mind consciously and subconsciously. That is, I think, written good. Don't get the reason episode like one dimension. That is.
The other part is the lack of consequences, of course, which we can rightfully see very critically. At the same time, viewing this as a show from the 90s, I feel like this is still something that I can view in a positive light, because it portrays this issue that, yeah, if you're an alcoholic and you got drunk and you go to the doctor's office and they say, well, in a few days you've slept it off, you are not being helped very much. And that is something that realistically very much happens.
But also as a consequence of his drinking, that it's the one weakness that you can catch him by. Because otherwise he could not have caught him. So we kind of see, if you want to get him, if you want to set him a trap, if you want to have something against him, you have to use alcohol. Otherwise that is hard to.
I mean that too.
Though I have to put in there, I would have liked it that this whole alcoholism thing would have been something that was built up. I mean, I go in or lean into your confidence of the way it's written, Alex. The idea that Garibaldi is an ex-alcoholic doesn't came up with this episode 11. The idea was always there, and I think there would have been a chance to now and then put him into a situation where someone was holding a drink or offering him a drink, and there could have been you could have kept that tension he would have to experience, and that is missing for me, because it comes so spontaneously. It's unbelievable to me, and you have to push, like you already said, Alex, you have to push yourself and work yourself into believing this.
What would have also been very interesting to see is like another point of discussion with Sinclair, because we already had Garibaldi and Sinclair sitting down talking about the different ways that they deal with the trauma that they have from the Earth Minbari War. So now this would have been I think this is what I would have rather seen than the last scene with Kemmer, Sinclair coming back to Garibaldi's quarters and saying, hey, look, I notice you've been drinking again. That's a very bad sign for you. Let's talk through this, which would have been a nice thing.
And certainly, yeah, better than the thing with Kemmer, because it's also so much unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I'm in my head, I'm trying to translate this alcohol addiction to something that is important to me, like sweets, because I'm really having a hard time to getting off sweet things. So I know this is not in any way comparable, since it's not necessarily destroying my life, and I'm until now so good off that I don't have diabetes from it, but that's the closest thing I can get to. And yes, I can understand that this can be really, really problematic thing to get away from. But yeah, it's not. He's not tempted. There's no tension in the storyline so far.
Maybe this is something that going forward we can be on the lookout for. Is this like having him fall off the wagon will start the entire process of being sober again, right? So maybe now the temptations are going to be stronger and maybe something that he has more actively engaged with. Because, I mean, one of these aspects is also Garibaldi has been sober for a very long time at this point. So this is probably one of the reasons why it doesn't come up this much, because he kind of has established his routines for all of this. Now that this has broken down, there's a good chance that he's going to start a lot of this work all over again. As a side note to the alcoholism that Garibaldi is struggling with, let's just talk for a small moment about the beauty that is this Babylon 5 dive bar with an alien in a hat and a poor Drazi falling to sleep in his own food. I love this portrayal because every time we've seen Down Below up to this point, it's been a bunch of people in rags, in between some piping, maybe some tents, but just generic portrayal of people being poor. And usually because there was a fight happening, somebody getting robbed, stabbed, or anything like this. And this is the first time that we see this less fortunate part of the station. And it's just people going about their lives. And they're under threat to Garibaldi, they're under threat to security or anybody else. They're just doing their thing peacefully. And that is just a very nice way of seeing, if we leave the perspective of Garibaldi as the security chief, you don't always see Down Below as this problem area. Now you get to see it as just a place where people live. And I really, really like that.
I think that's also something that contributes to drinking and letting go of thoughts. Because as the security chief, he always has to see that as a problem. He always has to really have in mind who he is, that he's a policeman to them, that they don't want him there. And I think all of that is also going away in that moment. Nice that to some.
Although he still is.
I'm a bit sad because on the one hand it shows it doesn't mean being poor you're a criminal, but on the next moment the guy with the hat is the one ratting Garibaldi out to the authorities, which, I mean, technically he is doing the right thing, but it kind of feels wrong to watch, since Garibaldi is, we know, innocent and everything else. And I mean, he got money from this guy earlier, so yeah.
It's a little bit of this thing where what is actually happening is completely fine. Like, if anything, it shows us that this random alien in the dive bar is a stand-up citizen who talks to security, but because of how the episode is framed, it puts him into this position of being an antagonist, which isn't the most fortunate thing.
Therefore, it would have been better if you had, like, in the background someone who's watching, and then I read you out, and then going to the authorities. I would think that would have matched more to this perspective.
I think you're completely right. I mean, if it had been the Drazi ratting Garibaldi out, I feel like that would have been entirely justified, because he had been tortured by wild, drunken stories for so long that at this point you could be convinced that, yeah, this guy needs to be put behind bars. He's a threat to everybody here. Anything else about Garibaldi's misadventures? I do really like the use of the alien sector, which we don't usually get to see a lot, but this time, once again, we saw that there's parts of the station that have different atmosphere, where he has to wear a mask, and there are like these little hatchways in between there. It just establishes that Babylon 5 is a big place with big, complicated places to go around.
I find it quite interesting, though, that Garibaldi obviously knows this, I forgot his name, this insect trader guy. Exactly. Because he knows him as the security guy, and that he obviously hasn't done anything against this dude, or couldn't do anything. I mean, obviously the enemy you know is better than the one you don't know, but I think it's interesting, but also it shows quite well how much of a problem there is to regulate things on Babylon 5, especially in the under sections.
And it's interesting because Garibaldi talks about this problem that he had back on Europa, where half of the people were crime lords, the other people were corrupt cops. So he's completely aware that this can go wrong very, very easily if somebody just slacks off and lets crime run wild. But at the same time, he seems to follow this logic, like you say, the enemy that I know is better than one that I don't know. And I think this speaks a little bit to Garibaldi's own sentiment, where he's like, well, if I tolerate a little bit of crime, I do it for good reasons, so it's fine. If somebody else does it, then it's bad because it's corruption, which for me fits in the mindset of somebody who has this, like Ivanova says, very Russian attitudes towards, I trust nothing that government does. Like it's usually this idea of being very reliant on your own personal sort of moral compass.
Yes, but also I think, I mean, you know that from a lot of other crime stories, also from ways that you always, as a policeman on some level, you always have these criminals where you just know it happens and you know what they do, but you know that you cannot prove it yet good enough. So you can request certain services from them, but you have never had the chance to really report them officially.
Although I absolutely love that McGrath just has to explain to him, like, yeah, you're out of a job right now, but you're still police. Like, I don't talk to the cops even if you don't have your badge with you, which seems very, very much what you would expect from the local, like, fixer.
So we had the topics, we had Earth politics, we had Rihanna, and we had the alcohol. What else is there in this episode?
Alien politics. Specifically, the single instance of both Londo and Jakar trying to use the situation to their own advantage. And personally, I'm a big fan of the way that Jakar treats Garibaldi once he shows up in his quarters, like explaining, oh yeah, we watch each other, that's like completely fine. You are like discussion topic number 1 in our espionage stories right now, and here, have a seat, have a drink. Oh, you don't want to drink? That's fine. Let me just explain to you how we would like you to become an agent of the Narn regime, like operate on you so that you can be like an undercover Narn agent in Earth Force.
I find it interesting that Garibaldi completely rejects that, like, I cannot betray my world. While what I always find the most reassuring about these galactic sci-fi worlds is always like, I could just
vanish.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of this thing where on the one hand, Garibaldi says, I don't trust the government, but he's a cop at the same time. So there has to be clearly some very strong feelings that he has towards something. He must be loyal to something. And here we see it's Earth in general, not necessarily this president, not necessarily this version of Earth Force, but fundamentally he still feels very much like I'm part of Earth and I will not betray that, which is in some way a little bit concerning because obviously this is also the kind of sentiment that an organization like Home Guard would prey on. If they have somebody who maybe feels more lost, like you could imagine somebody in Garibaldi's situation who doesn't have a support network, who doesn't get back into his job, would be a crime candidate to now go to Home Guard and say, I am such a loyal servant, but the big machine of the government betrayed me. Please give me something, another perspective, and they would be happy to do that.
The question though is it Earth he's aligned to, or is it more like let's say human traits? Like, I mean, this is like a basic philosophical question. What does it mean to be human? And how does this differentiate to the other alien species? But I would rather put it down to something like that, like emotions, something like feeling alike, feeling like belonging to something. I think this is more the connection there than Earth is like more like national thing. You could translate this, and I think from what we get until now, Garibaldi, I think it's more on this emotionally part there.
I think, yeah, if we would have to put it in concrete terms, like I completely believe Garibaldi is loyal to Sinclair, for example, because that is a person that he individually knows and that he has to do with, and I think this is sort of the level that he functions. and couldn't be too bad. Which it's still kind of a shame for me, because personally I would have loved the spin-off show The Adventures of Meike and Garibaldi as part of the Nan regime. I feel like him and Jakar do have kind of a nice chemistry that we can see shine through in the scene, where it could have been a lot of mischief. And yeah, just as a side note, I love the fact that how casually Londo just uses this opportunity to say, yeah, it was probably Jakar. He must know that this doesn't work out, but it's just like such a convenient way for him to slight the Nan regime one more time.
But I also think that this emotional connection and this like national connection, they can kind of work into each other. And I think that notable here, you should remember that Garibaldi definitely has this bound to be. I don't think everyone necessarily has to the traits and the culture they grew up in. I once had a friend who was very patriotic about a small town in the north of Germany that was not Hamburg. So when in Hamburg we say moin instead of hello, and these regions fight with each other if you say moin or moin moin. And he was insulted when I accidentally said moin moin, and that can escalate.
It's like weirdly arbitrary rules. That
Yeah.
I mean, if to go back to alcohol, I mean, this is like the debate what's the best beer in Germany. If you ask a Bavarian, of course, it's what you get on the Oktoberfest. But if you ask someone from Cologne, they will give you a completely different answer. That's
No one likes Kölsch, not even from Cologne.
I better not tell them that's my fault.
So there you found your next arch nemesis right there. Yeah, definitely. This is a great example.
I had a point I wanted to make, but I forgot it. But what did I want to say? What Jakar is doing here with Garibaldi, I think it feels rather the same way what he did to what's the name of our first telekinetic?
Lita was the first.
Lita. Yeah, I mean, I think it was Lita who was proposed to have kids with him, right?
Well, he definitely has done that to Talia, I would presume as well.
But he and Lita constantly.
He has a thing for reds because his skin, I would assume.
But yeah, you're right.
It feels like the same here. I don't know.
You are also wondering where Garibaldi's pleasure threshold sits. It's whether or not I was going to find him.
I didn't say that.
I don't know. I mean, Jakar feels like the guy who would make arrangements for that as well. He seems to not care as long as he gets telepathic genes one way or the other.
No, but I mean the mechanics, how he's doing it, it's just casually on the sideline. Oh yeah, by the way, we have a place here. It's not like asking, it's like, yeah, you do this.
I think it's interesting if we assume that it's actually true that he can provide a spaceship and these accommodations and stuff. It fits the way that the Nal regime seems to go about these things, because the Nal regime, from what we know, has always been at a disadvantage, where it has always been technologically and resource-wise behind its nemesis, the Centauri Republic. So it kind of makes sense that one of the ways that they compensate for that is going around and just hiring everybody they can. And they specifically say here, Mr. Garibaldi, you are security chief on a Babylon 5 station, on like a big military outpost. That is actually a set of expertise that is valuable to us. And it tells you something, that they are not just looking for head scientists or like massive arms deals or telepaths, but also somebody like Garibaldi, just a security chief with some level of insight into how Earth Force works, is valuable to them, and they are willing to actually go with this. And of course, you can always ask, this didn't work now, but I mean, I'm assuming at some point somebody did say yes to Jakar, otherwise he wouldn't keep making these proposals. So this seems to be a strategy that they are following and that works every so often. I find that quite interesting as a characterization for this faction.
Another strategy I liked in this episode was Ivanova going, okay, we make a maintenance check on the communications just to shut off everything, so Earth Alliance wasn't able to get called. I really like this.
I also just really love this moment where Liana then requests her channel to Earth.
Yes.
No.
It is kind of interesting, isn't it, that we see on both sides this idea of their positions have certain perks and certain authorities, right? Like Sinclair can say, I am the commander of this station. I don't take orders from anybody else. If somebody wants to give me orders, I can go through the hassle of having a higher up somewhere else confirm these orders, and that buys me a few hours of time, which, we have to admit is obviously not in the spirit of the chain of command that is established here. He's clearly doing this only for his own interest, just the same as Kemmer does this for her own goals. It's just on the one side we agree because, yay, it's our heroes. On the other side we say, oh no, that's not good because she's doing that only for her own reasons. So I like this as a portrayal that these leeways are a consistent thing in Earth Alliance that sometimes works out in our favor and sometimes it doesn't. And I completely agree that Ivanova is very, very good at this. My favorite line of hers is escorting Kemmer off the command deck and saying, "You are going to resist, I hope," which is a wonderful thread.
She just wants to have fun. But also, I always wondered. I mean, when I first watched it, I always wondered how Ivanova could be so relaxed in situations where she just does this maintenance thing, just has this discussion with Liana. But then I also have to remember that she is kind of sheltered because she's still following orders from Sinclair. If something goes wrong and someone searches for the responsible person, it's not her. And I think that's something that also allows her to behave like this while Sinclair has the more serious trouble.
And she knows Sinclair will have her back, even if she messes up. This is also something, right? I mean, there are a lot of love at it. I try again.
It was very cute. So it was great. Sorry.
No, you will cut this out.
No chance.
I didn't say that.
I know where your bed sleeps. Be nice.
Oh no.
I forget what I wanted to say.
Sinclair has her back.
Yeah, if you have someone who is higher up who would rat you out because he would say, hey, she's the one who did it. I have nothing to do with it. It would be a completely different situation. But she knows it's not like this.
And this is something that is recognized even by the presidential staff. Like they say, oh, Ivanova and Sinclair both have Garibaldi's back when he has gone rogue. And they say, well, that's no surprise. And I think this speaks a little bit to the nature of Babylon 5, that in Earth Force overall, this is a relatively remote post where there's this small clique, this small group of people that are assigned there who are all not necessarily favored by Earth Force. They are all in their own ways a little bit of an outcast. Garibaldi with his problems, Sinclair wasn't always has the trouble that he carries around with his heroism, which also comes through in this episode, him jumping into the fray and punching a bunch of dudes when Garibaldi is in trouble. And so it kind of is this interesting dynamic where I wonder, back on Earth, how do people feel about this remote outpost where whoever you assign there for more than a year just becomes part of this tight-knit group that will just, always have each other's backs and necessarily not in the main interest of what Earth wants.
But also I wonder, I mean, the clique of, that group of people that protects the president also kind of has this dynamic with each other. And I wonder if it's not also something the writer just wants to tell you, that whatever authority or structure of command is there, people are people and have these connections and try to work them out around that, which is a big world.
That's also often cited, this is one of the main strengths why you have something like military stuff, because you want to create this strength through hierarchy.
Yes, but also not too much, because you don't want to have people not follow orders.
Yes, of course. You want them to be loyal within the group, but then the group also loyal to the rest. This is where the hierarchy becomes interesting. Yeah, definitely. And you can only imagine how much of a big mess this is in an organization like Earth Alliance and Earth Force, where this hierarchy is not only global but spans multiple planets. And this brings us back full circle to why the president might want to visit a place like Babylon 5, because trying to keep all of this together is a massive task.
if you go before you go further, I think the one of the things that is portrayed here quite well is the problematic of outsiders coming to a place they know nothing about and trying to overrule everything just to get it done the way they want to, which is usually a problematic thing because you can't come with ideas and a way of doing things and implement it on something or another structure. It's like if I think I heard this on a discussion about Afghanistan, was it? On the book fair the last year about where especially there was a segment about a woman in Afghanistan. One of the things that was said, really struck with me, is that what a lot of NGOs tried was get the methods they had from other countries, bring to Afghanistan, which doesn't work because these structures were made in other countries, in other settings. You can't just transport this to another country and hope that it works or that it's recognized and accepted. And I think this is a bit of this feeling is a bit of in here, which kind of makes this revolting of Ivanova, of Sinclair, feel acceptable, because an outway force is pushing their way on the station.
And I think we see even different layers on this, where you have the crew of Babylon 5 who have come to Babylon 5 for the express purpose of not making the universe adhere to their own rules, but learn to live with the rest of the universe. That's the mission statement. Then you have the presidential staff who basically says, we have a schedule for the president's visit. We have this list of targets that we want to meet. The rest of the world is just going to have to adhere to this. Like, why does Emma go over bodies to get this investigation done as quickly as possible? Because she is unwilling to reschedule anything else. Like, it is never an option that the president gets delayed. And the even more extreme of the version of this is, I think, a way that you can interpret Home Guard's entire idea, because they also want to enforce their own ideology, their own idea on a universe that fundamentally doesn't agree with them, and in this case even on an Earth alliance that doesn't agree with them. And so they just take the most radical measure and just start placing bombs everywhere, which, yeah, you can kind of translate this into every level of that. Okay. We've gone, like you said, through all the main topics that we had. We've veered out even into a bit of alien politics and the motivations of Home Guard now. Is there anything else that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about? Anything as important as holographic knights may?
Oh, I think I made my points.
Does anybody want to talk about the implications that Centauri apparently have ducats, and how glorious that is that they have like printed gold coins? It's wonderfully old-fashioned. And apparently very, very valuable. Like the small satchel of Centauri ducats had like a value of hundreds of thousands of Earth credits. So their economy must be doing really well for the inflation. The conversion rates are just crazy.
I mean, we also had at some point coins that were valuable, like a lot more than what we usually have as a change in our pockets now.
So if we would return to the glory days of the Centauri Republic, we could have those coins again. There you see where radical Centauri are born.
I mean, if you have a hard coin, there's at least something like in Handmaid's Tale wouldn't be possible, because one of the starting points was that the money got the whole banking system was abolished and you didn't have any money. So hard coin can, or cash in general, can prevent something like that, because technically it's just fantasy money. It doesn't exist. I mean, in a way, that's what banks do to a certain degree, but
there's an entire different podcast topic that we can dive into. And totally Handmaid's Tale. I feel like that could be an interesting crossover. But no, if that's our main points done, let's dive a little bit into the tapestry, which is in dire need of a catch up, because I need to get the graphic done for this. Finally, it's getting out of control. But at the very latest, for the season finale, I'm there for tapestry season 1. So no worries about that. So let's talk a little bit about things that got carried over from the show so far. And I think for me, the biggest topic in this week's episode is the entire aspect of politics. I feel like we've gotten a lot more of an insight of how the dynamic between the president, now that he's elected, and the rest of government and the home guard sort of movements back home kind of works out. I think I have like a clearer idea of what that looks like. But the way it looks seems to also set up just a lot of tensions that can potentially escalate further, because you now have a government that, despite having won the election, is in itself sort of racked with internal divisions. That's usually not a great sign.
I would say it's more like, if I would picture it, it feels like a group of sharks circling around Babylon 5, and you just wait for something to happen. But there are a lot of small bits there, but it's not, at least to me, it doesn't feel like there's this one thing. I mean, you have there's the chance of coming to a big clash between Earth forces and Alliance, or the pro-Earthers going on Babylon 5 and making a mess there, or that's maybe something like a cut between Babylon 5 and Earth. But the problem is there are a lot of possibilities there, so there's no straight line for me to see there.
I imagine it's also hard to imagine right now, like, who on earth really becomes the driving force, right? Like, we've talked about how the president has some problematic positions. That might be a problem. We've seen that the Senate has problematic positions. They might be a problem. And we've seen that people on earth, like Home Guard, have problematic positions. That might be a problem. So we not only see these internal divisions, but all of them are also potentially against Babylon 5 or potentially not. So apart from Home Guard, which has no chance of being pro Babylon 5, but there is this, like you say, different sharks, and we don't know
who's gonna bite first.
Yeah, or if there's going to be biting. Okay, anything else from the previous show up to this point that popped up again? I mean, we talked tentatively about the feud between London and Jakar obviously continues on the side. Meike, you already alluded to the fact that a lot of this came suddenly, so would you say in general this was more of a break from the Garibaldi character that you've known so far? Or?
Yeah, I have a question to that, because you suggested for a poll that we should on whether Garibaldi was the better commander. What do you think about that now?
It's problematic to say this generally. I thought that I still think there are, if there's further development for Sinclair to not be this messy, hot-headed person he's been at the beginning, he's doing a fine job so far. Which is still contrasted with Garibaldi, who seems more content, more calm, except if he has a drink. But I think they all have enough problems resulting in a pro and con situation for their position, or it's I don't know. It's like walking on a tightrope there.
I mean, what we've definitely seen in this episode is how we already said how tight knit this group is, right? So Sinclair can be a good commander, as long as he has Ivanova backing him up and Garibaldi to talk him down when he gets too hot-headed. And after this episode, I can easily imagine, Garibaldi would make a good commander as long as he has Sinclair as in an important position to talk him down when things go back and Ivanova backing him up. So I feel like this trio can work in different configurations very easily because they support each other very well, they accommodate each other very well. But it gets harder and harder to say, oh, this one would be perfectly suited to this or that position, because ultimately they all rely on each other so much that you always want the full package, not isolate anyone. That makes it also very easy to swap anybody else in that we've seen so far, because that we don't know if those dynamics would work as well. All right, then. I think, like we said in the beginning, this is a very narrow episode in terms of the plot, so there isn't all that much. Obviously, Umgard as a threat got carried forward, but talking about hopes and dreams for the future, while you were gone, we already alluded to that. It would be great to maybe have a future scene between Garibaldi and Sinclair, talking about the alcoholism coming up, because Garibaldi sat down with Sinclair when he was getting too hot-headed, so the converse of that would be, are there any other character interactions or story beats that you feel like would be interesting to carry forward from this? Because I feel like this is where this episode has a lot of potential. Maybe establishing things that later on I'll look back on.
I really like this, how both of you at the same time looked at me. Meike, what do you have to say to this?
I mean, I think I was just thinking that maybe it would be interesting to see if there was really opened up a problem for Garibaldi, like if alcohol is something that comes up here and there and if it will have consequences for the story, or if it was a one-time adventure, or if he gets it under control or not.
Sorry, the description of alcoholism as a one-time adventure is brilliant. No, that's perfectly fine, because so often in 90s TV it is. So that's completely legitimate to say.
So,
and it is introduced as a big problem for Garibaldi, and if you wouldn't leave it as a one-time problem, it would feel fake. It would feel like a extra episode that's not relevant for the bigger plot. So definitely something that should pop up once in a while, and even if it's just in small bits, like he's watching or looking at a glass of alcohol, or declining an offer.
Should keep an eye out for every time Garibaldi is in bar from now on. Like maybe they do the due diligence, make a point of him just or something.
Yes. Then maybe at this point, we've already talked about Wonder what happened.
I would say Lando and Garibaldi, because in this episode it's clear stated that there's some sort of friendship-like connection between them. I mean, even the I think his name was Cutter, the guy who was second in after Cameron. He was the one who said that there's this Centauri ambassador Garibaldi is seen often with. And I mean, if this makes its way to the officials, there has to be some kind of friendly, friendship-like connection between these two. And I would love to see more of this, because I like the vibe of these two. But also, I also like the communication between Garibaldi and Jakar.
But I think it's good that you mentioned Garibaldi and Lando, because we have a very significant moment here where Garibaldi sort of lists off, hey, here's this horrible thing that is happening to you. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that. And Lando kind of asks, you really think I would be this sort of horrible and conniving? And Garibaldi just straight up says, yeah, you definitely would. And they are immediately this frank with each other. This level of frankness is not something that we've seen from Lando, I think, ever since he was in bed with Adira. Like, once again, this
comparison again.
Yeah, but Garibaldi had a very intimate connection to Jakar this episode and to Lando as well. But it is really the case that Londo usually always works with politicking and masks, and he took his first mask off for Garibaldi here, so they are getting to first base, is what I'm saying.
But what
Oh, sorry, Alex, I hate you know this picture. I'm not getting it out of my head.
What I was also thinking about was in this moment where I don't know the names of the side characters in this case, but where one of Liana's little reports, he specifically chooses the phrase that Garibaldi and Londo are known to be good close friends. And I was always wondering if because Londo was greeted because Londo greeted Garibaldi like my dear old friend. If someone just heard that and reported that and just didn't know how often Londo actually uses that phrase.
That would be beautiful.
That would be nice.
But definitely the dynamic there would be fun seeing more. And I mean, it makes sense. Like Garibaldi is security chief, and that means more than being a good detective. It means that he should be very good at connecting with people.
He is very intimate.
That too. No, but he should be good at networking, right? He should be good at making connections with people, getting information from them. So, yeah, the fact that he is having a pretty good rapport with both JR and Londo kind of speaks volumes that he has some very good potential there. Okay. So other than that fan fiction content, I think we've tapped all that the tapestry can give us for today. So I think it's outro time, and I've talked about two different audience questions that we asked previously, so we should come up with a very good one for future reference.
One would be, how would you react in a Garibaldi situation? Would you go, doesn't matter, I go to the non-regime and be a spy for them?
I think that's a pretty good question. Or in general, if you are on Babylon 5 and have become a refugee, which alien species would you choose to? Because I feel like for the right amount of money, the Centauri would also take you in. So in which bed do you want to end up in?
And I mean, the Children of Light, I don't know, maybe if you go to their believing system, maybe they would take you in also. I don't know.
I somehow get the feeling they would have a pretty strict set of rules when it comes to alcohol, but you know, who knows? Maybe the ceremonial wine is actually very good. Okay, if that's the question we go with, who wants to take us out through the intro? Outro. See, I can't do it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for watching this episode. Thank you for your condolences on my part in the last episode. And yes, if you liked our episode today, we would be more than happy if you give us some kind of reaction, being a thumb up, being a heart, commenting or sharing our content on every platform there is available. I think by now you know we're almost everywhere, and where we are not, that doesn't just exist. Let's go with that.
And finally, there's one thing that you can prepare yourself for. Although we are not celebrating Halloween as much as other people, we have prepared something special. So something special and out of a schedule will come up on October the 31st.
Wonderful.